A crazy session at the United Nations. Donald Trump at the center of it all to break down what happens and what it means about U.S. foreign policy in a fast-changing world. I'm joined by Sean Speer, my co-founder and editor at large. He is in New York City. He's not officially attending the meetings of the General Assembly, but he's on the sidelines, lunching, I understand, Sean, enjoying New York's finest restaurants and all the Canadians that have hurried down there to be part of what was a remarkable at least 24 hours.
Yeah, on a whole host of fronts, including, as you alluded, President Trump's rather unconventional address to the General Assembly.
Yeah, let's get into that. Then I want to talk a little bit about Mark Carney because he's down there talking too. But let's begin with Trump. I guess, Sean, what people know, a lot of the key kind of messages the president sent, very critical of his European allies on immigration, saying their countries are going to hell, coming out and reiterating his belief that climate change is a hoax. What is this, Sean? Is this an act? Because with Trump, I never know whether we should take this stuff seriously or just chalk it up to the fact that he's up on a big stage there. He's performing. He's clearly enjoying himself. He's enjoying the attention and the controversy. Or is there actual policy consequences behind these words?
What struck me about the speech, Rudyard, I'd be interested in your reaction to this, is just it presented the contradictions at the heart of quote unquote Trumpism. You know, over the past 9 months or so, the president himself, as well as Vice President Vance, have said various things about America First, about free speech, about a whole host of issues where one can agree or disagree with it. But there is a kind of theory of the case, if I can put it that way. You know, with respect to America First, for instance, the notion that America was overextended in the world, that America's principal interest is around the North American continent. It's not getting itself entangled in different parts of the globe, or having even views on how different societies ought to organize themselves. Again, you know, one can agree or disagree with aspects of America First, but as a doctrine for American foreign policy and its relationship to countries around the world, there's a coherence to it. There isn't, however, a coherence when on one hand, one purports to be America First, and then on the other hand, addresses the General Assembly and tells every country around the world how it ought to organize its domestic affairs. And I think that in a way encapsulates rather this kind of contradiction that at times I think risks people reading too much into what Trump's saying and doing. At the end of the day, I think all the way down, it's just Trump and his own kind of incoherence.
Yeah. I wonder, though, Sean, if it doesn't have a consequence to the extent that it's not necessarily the absence of leadership, but it's the chaos of American leadership at this moment. And I guess what I worry about is, you know, the person who's not in that picture, Xi Jinping, right? Who's the superpower competitor, who's now, as we've discussed on the Hub, seemingly starting to assemble a block of so-called non-aligned countries from Russia to North Korea to Iran to Brazil and even potentially India's Modi. I guess, Sean, I wonder if the consequences, as you say, are not so much the words, the hyperbole, but it's how this plays into an opportunity for countries like China in particular, but others too, to be on the so-called sidelines, but nonetheless in the slipstream of this chaos that Trump creates. And they're using that to open up new relationships. They're using it to expand their power. And they're ultimately doing that to the detriment of the United States and in no small way to the detriment of Canada and Canadians, to the extent that we want to be in a Western-led, generally freer world with more open trade and less authoritarianism.
Yeah, I think that's precisely right. If you're a a middle power or even a small power, and you're looking at this address, the Assembly of the UN General Assembly, pardon me, it has to create doubts in your mind about the reliability of the United States, the coherence of American policy, the extent to which you can trust America to live up to its commitments to you. And that, as you say, has created leverage, particularly for China to start to bring different countries within his orbit. We saw, for instance, in recent weeks, the important meeting between Xi and Modi and Putin. What I was trying to get at, in some ways, maybe it's a reflection of my own failings, is Rudyard, we're interested in ideas, we're interested in policy. We want to try to intellectualize as much as possible the utterances of the president. What does this mean? How should we interpret it? What kind of framework does it fit in? And that's why I say, on one hand, although I'm ultimately a critic of the underlying assumptions and ideologies of America First, isolationism as a kind of foreign policy doctrine, I think does have a degree of coherence. But how one can purport to be America First on one hand, and then weigh into individual policy decisions of other countries on the other doesn't make sense. Similarly, you'll recall soon after the inauguration in January, Vice President Vance goes to Europe and criticizes the Europeans for their lack of commitment to free speech. And yet, over the past couple of weeks, we've seen the U.S. administration use the levers of power, the levers of the state, to effectively crack down on free speech, completely in contradiction with the president and the vice president's utterances. So in some ways, we just have to accept the fact that this is an administration full of contradictions, and the risk of trying to intellectualize it is that they let you down each and every time.
Yeah. Interesting contradiction on display. As you say, the tone of this speech, a kind of damn all your houses, burn all our bridges. And then he has a bilateral with Zelensky where, he's communicating, NATO should shoot down Russian planes that come into their territory. Ukraine can reconquer all of its lost territory. Russia's on the verge of collapse. It's whiplash. It's 180 degrees from the dressing down of Zelensky in the Oval Office, not 4 months ago. And again, I think it's good that the president seems to be getting back on board to support the Ukrainians in their fight against Russia. But boy, Sean, these abrupt U-turns, this seemingly just inability to know what, in fact, he wants, what is on his mind, what is in America's interest. I feel for Marco Rubio there as Secretary of State, just trying to chase this runaway train to follow the president through one gyration to a next. And again, it all feeds into this chaos that seems to be consuming his administration at home and abroad.
You're a student of history. There's the famous story in the context of the Cuban Missile Crisis when President Kennedy calls President de Gaulle to talk to him about the presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba, and he offers him the intelligence, and apocryphally de Gaulle says, your word is good enough. I don't need to see the evidence. I mean, who around the world, Rudyard, today would have that kind of trust and confidence in what the president is saying, when on one hand he's talking about the need, in effect, for Ukraine to accept whatever terms Russia puts on the table, to effectively blame the war and conflict on Ukraine, to the next day talking about the potential for Ukraine to ultimately, quote unquote, win the war. That kind of incoherence and contradiction would be kind of humorous if it was someone at the end of a bar. But this isn't. This is the president of the United States, the quote unquote leader of the free world, and the lack of consistency and the chaos, as you put it, has real costs.
Yeah. Let's just end with Mark Carney, who who was in New York, obviously part of the proceedings, gave a press conference yesterday. I caught a little bit of it. Our prime minister likes these types of stages. He's good at them. He seems to know everybody. He's obviously part of this kind of club, either the Euro club or the UN club. How do you think this plays here at home? I worry a little bit, Sean, that it invokes a kind of nostalgia for a Canada that just doesn't exist anymore. It creates the simulation of that indispensable middle power, a la Lester B. Pearson. And I mean, God bless Lester B. Pearson, and God bless that era of Canadian history. But, it was a time when we had a real military, when economically we were one of the dominant G7 countries, and when we were involved in peacekeeping and other missions around the world at a scale that is 10x to what we are today. So what do you feel, Sean? I'll give you the last word here, between Mark Carney's kind of nostalgia tour of international organizations like the UN and WTO and the International Bank of Settlements. You can go through all the different acronyms versus the kind of reality of Canada and the reality of this challenging budget that he's going to release on November 4th.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. He clearly feels most comfortable in the salons of the Council on Foreign Relations, but he's not a technocrat. He's a elected leader of a country that faces a lot of economic challenges in the current moment. And you wonder, Roger, the notwithstanding the extent to which Canadians may feel good that he's that he's elevated Canada's standing with some of these major players around the world, that at the end of the day, talking about, the delta between X and Y, or whatever the types of things that Mark Carney talks to his friends about, just it drops like a lead balloon with Canadians who, according to polling from David Coletto, are increasingly worried about basic things like jobs, mortgages, etc. The disconnect between Carney at the Council on Foreign Relations and the type of politician that he's going to need to be in the coming weeks and months, I think, has been on display over the past couple of days.
Yeah, well said. And also, again, we don't like it. We wouldn't want the world to be this way, but what are the consequences, for instance, of our recognizing a Palestinian state vis-a-vis the U.S. and our trade negotiations, when Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is making it clear that Canada, quote, will pay a price for this. Whose club are we trying to belong to? What signals are we trying to send to who? Are we trying to show our progressive credentials vis-a-vis Palestine with our new friends in Europe? Is that what the play is? Let's just extend this interview for a moment to have you answer that, because I think it is consequential, the extent to which Carney is now starting to lean heavily towards Europe. He's leaned hard into the recognition of a Palestinian state. These are things that clearly the Trump administration is watching. They're starting to comment on, and they seem, Sean, to run counter to his arguably the reason that he was elected, which was to fashion and bring home a trade deal that would normalize the economic relationship with the United States.
Yeah, it wasn't just symbolism that the prime minister's first trip after being sworn in as prime minister was to Europe. He clearly has a personal rapport with Starmer, Macron, and others. And I would come back to the beginning of our conversation. Notwithstanding the lack of diplomacy and the coarseness and all the rest of President Trump's remarks to the General Assembly, a lot of his criticisms about Europe are right. It is sclerotic. It is overregulated. It has increasing problems with the integration of refugees and migrants. It has a public finance problem rooted in a lack of economic growth, too big government, and too many entitlements for the continent's aging population. America is a mess. Don't get me wrong, but over the long run, I'm still bullish on America and bearish on Europe. And in that sense, Carney's seeming choice here to throw our eggs in the basket of Europe may be interesting in the short term, but over the long run, I think it's a mistake for the country.
Yeah. Well, Sean, thanks for the analysis and insights. A consequential couple of days at the UN. It's starting to give us a bit of a feel, a flavor, both of the Carney administration and again, the growing chaos around Trump and the potential consequences for his administration, U.S. foreign policy. So thanks for breaking it all down for our listeners and viewers today.
Great. Let's talk again soon.
Yeah. If you are listening to this on our podcast feed, thank you for being one of the over 250,000 downloads of Hub Podcasts in the last 30 days. We really appreciate your patronage. Leave us a review. Tell us what you think about the Hub's audio programs. And if you're over on our YouTube channel, we're zeroing in on that 70,000 subscriber mark. Help us out. Become a subscriber today to the Hub on YouTube. Just do that by clicking on the subscribe button. Thanks again for watching and listening. We'll talk to you and speak with you soon. Until next time, bye-bye. This video has been brought to you by Airbnb. A big thank you to Airbnb for sponsoring the Hub's YouTube channel this month. It's great to be the beneficiaries of their support. Here at the Hub, we talk a lot about the housing crisis ongoing in the country. As we know, there are people out there that think that short-term rentals are to blame for taking supply off the market. But here at the Hub, we can feel that that doesn't make sense. You know, consider for a moment that the median number of nights an Airbnb is hosting someone in Canada as a guest is 55. These, frankly, aren't full-time rental properties. They are Canadians trying to get by like the rest of us by finding some additional income through renting out a property they own. Government data supports this. Statistics Canada recently reported the amount of Airbnbs that could actually be converted into long-term homes accounts for only 0.6% of Canada's housing stock. Canada needs solutions to tackle the whole housing market, not just 0.6% of it. We agree. Learn more at airbnb.ca/closer look.